As of October 12th, 2023, the day I'm recording this, we don't have solid sales numbers of Starfield just yet, but it's pretty safe to assume they're solid. The game may have launched as part of Game Pass, but it also sat at the top of Steam charts for weeks on end, and it was the top paid game on the Xbox Digital Store for a solid amount of time, and the physical collector's edition sold out almost instantly, so there was definitely a massive amount of people who wanted to own a proper copy of this game, despite it being on Game Pass. While I agree with the people that say Game Pass does make it a tad hard to gauge financial success for individual releases nowadays, Starfield just wasn't a good example of that, because even though we don't have solid numbers of it, we have overwhelming evidence that it sold very well even by the standards of games that don't launch as part of Game Pass. I think it's safe to say that on Steam alone, Starfield has certainly sold at least 5 million copies, because like Baldur's Gate 3 sold over 5 million on Steam, and that number was from back in August, so after just a few weeks at the top of Steam charts, Baldur's Gate had sold 5 million, but then you have Starfield, which was right next to it on the top of Steam charts and even past it for a while, and it was there for a longer stretch of time, because remember, Starfield was in the top 5 of Steam charts for weeks before it even came out because of all the pre-orders. Like, the point I'm getting at here is that if Baldur's Gate 3 had sold 5 million on Steam back in August, I think it's very safe to assume that Starfield has also sold at least 5 million on Steam, just judging off of both games' positions on the charts and how long they've been there and whatnot. And also, like, it's a Bethesda game, it's a Bethesda RPG, it's going to sell 5 million on Steam. It really should not be controversial to say that Starfield made a decent amount of money, especially on Steam. But if things were that simple, we wouldn't be here. So the other day, this tweet from Marius PS Banner started making the rounds. He said, Starfield sales on Steam are estimated at between 5 and 10 million, an unimaginable result for a game on the Game Pass day one, worldwide success. And he attached a screenshot of Steam Spy, which has it at between 5 and 10 million owners, which, oh man, what a narrow prediction there. Now, a few things to point out here. First of all, as many people have pointed out, and as you probably noticed by now, Steam Spy is not the most amazing source of all time, mainly because of the large estimations like this, but somewhere between 5 and 10 million. Oh, you don't say. That narrows it down. But if you've been paying even a little bit of attention to Starfield on Steam, this number shouldn't be hard to believe, Like, Steam Spy can be iffy, and the real number can be unknown, but 5 to 10 million copies on Steam is absolutely believable, considering the fact that Starfield was in the top 10 bestsellers for literal weeks before launch, and then continued to sit in the top 10 for literal weeks after launch, and at the time that I'm recording this video, it's still in the top 20. So yeah, 5 to 10 million copies sounds incredibly believable. It's one of those instances where this exact screenshot probably isn't the best representation of the numbers, but that doesn't mean the numbers are completely unbelievable and definitely not true, The information seems solid, it's just communicated in a not so fantastic way. But if you were one of the people hating on Starfield for 6 months straight, you probably don't see it this way. It's like I've said before, whether or not this screenshot is accurate, that's not really funny. But people being in denial of Starfield selling 5 million copies on Steam, that is funny. And after this initial post started getting some traction on the good old-fashioned internet, a ton of people got really upset and just stopped thinking at step 1 because, again, the screenshot itself is probably flawed, but the information being communicated in the point of the screenshot is probably pretty accurate. But if you were in the dedicated Starfield reverse defense squad leading up to launch, you probably saw this tweet as the perfect opportunity to get back into the swing of things and start calling Starfield a flop again, and I'm glad you did that, because good lord, welcome home. Stridix responds, that's it? Cyberpunk has 25 million, and around 70% is on PC, albeit that was 3 years ago release, and that wasn't even on Game Pass. This is what I mean when I say the screenshot totally could have been criticized, but instead you went after the information in the screenshot, and it just makes you sound really dumb. We're talking about 5 to 10 million copies sold on one storefront of one platform, and you're like, that's it? What about Cyberpunk? Which also, bad argument alert, because Cyberpunk reportedly sold 13 million copies in its first month, and that was on console and PC. So 13 million across all platforms versus 5 to 10 million on just Steam. And you think that comparison is worthy of a that's it? How fucking jaded are people to sales numbers now? Good lord. Quacky Chan responds, owners don't mean sales, LMAO. Bet that number includes Game Pass. Yeah, the screenshot says 5 to 10 million owners, meaning it includes people who got the game gifted to them, which is still a sale of the game, or people who got a key from some method that doesn't involve buying the game, which is probably like, I don't know, like maybe 1% of total owners on Starfield who got it totally for free, like, and nobody paid for it anywhere. But also Steam doesn't have Game Pass, so Game Pass wouldn't be included there. Oh my god, it never ends. Lil Rizgy says should be way higher for the biggest game on a service with way more subscribers. Bro, this is Steam, not Game Pass. Why can't you fucking read? Gary Murphy says, meanwhile, PlayStation exclusives regularly sell this amount with a much lower install base. Shrug emoji. Ah yes, 5 to 10 million copies sold on the PlayStation. Wonderful. 5 to 10 million copies sold on Steam. Kill yourself. Too many people have PCs. Unheard Series says, let's be honest. If it says 5 to 10 trillion, you would believe it, don't you? First of all, learn English. Second of all, I gotta tell ya, I don't know why 5 to 10 million on Steam is so hard to believe. Like, again, Baldur's Gate 3, which was within 5 spots of Starfield on the Steam charts for a long time, and Starfield was actually up there first, Baldur's Gate 3 sold 5 million copies on Steam as of August. So why is it hard to believe that Starfield, a game that was also at the top of Steam for an even longer period of time, why is it so hard to believe that it also passed 5 million copies? Like, you shouldn't need hard numbers straight from Microsoft to put these things together. N64 Fan Penguin says, that's it? Skyrim exceeded that in 2 days, and it's taken Starfield 3 weeks? It's even dropped below RuneScape on concurrent players. How you getting slapped by a medieval clicker game from 2002? Bro, that's crazy. One of the biggest multiplayer games ever has more concurrent players than a single player RPG. That's wild. That's literally never happened before in all of history. But also, I'm genuinely not sure where you're getting the Skyrim numbers from, because according to my own research, Skyrim sold 3.4 million copies in 2 days, which I don't know if you know this, but 3.4 is a smaller number than 5, but good try. Thomas says that's a very bad estimate. Between 5 and 10 mil, when at peak it had under 400k players. Maybe you should consider checking your sources. I really hate how I have to keep repeating this, but copies sold does not correlate with concurrent players on a single player game. If a game doesn't rely on people sharing the servers and inhabiting the game world together, and instead is all about playing the game on your own time without the influence of other people or other players, of course the concurrent player stats are not going to be cranking every day. The fact that Starfield as a single player game, the fact that its Steam charts page still looks like this, is a testament to how many fucking people are playing it, not a representation of whether or not it was successful. But just to put my money where my mouth is, Baldur's Gate 3, again, sold over 5 million copies on Steam, right? This is what its Steam page looks like. 5 million copies sold, but these are the Steam chart numbers. And Baldur's Gate 3 has a multiplayer component, so these Steam charts should make you just shit your pants and cry, right? But no, they're not going to do that, because you don't actually understand how this works. Just to hammer it home, Hogwarts Legacy, one of the biggest launches in Steam history for a single-player game, earlier this year, and this is what the concurrent player counts look like. Does that suddenly mean all those copies were not sold? Does that mean suddenly all the people who added the game to their library aren't actually owners anymore because these are the concurrent player counts? Of course not. But anything to bash the latest Xbox Studios game, right? It's an incredible use of your time. Jeff Oscar says, dude, that's nowhere near a success for a game that celebrated over 10 million people playing. Do the math. If 10 million people actually bought the game, a $69.99, instead of renting it, Bethesda would have grossed $699,900,000, so to think $10 million as a success is pathetic. Bro, what the fuck does any of that mean? JackXPC says, how is it estimate that many sold when Steam player charts do not match? Baldur's Gate 3 has 2 to 3 times higher player count and higher sales on Steam. For like the 9th time, Baldur's Gate and Starfield were sitting in the Steam top 5 for weeks on end, both of them. And yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 has higher concurrent players. And yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 has spent more time in the Steam top 5, post-release, while Starfield has been hanging out in the top 20 post-release. But the point that I'm getting at, and the reason why this argument is so stupid, and why you should stop bringing up concurrent player counts with this, is because you can't look at Baldur's Gate 3's Steam chart numbers and concurrent players and be like, oh yes, this is evidence that it was a huge success. But then do the same thing to Starfield and be like, yes, this is evidence that it's not impressive. Like, the game you use as a benchmark of PC gaming, like a lot of you guys are using Baldur's Gate 3 as a benchmark, that game sold 5 million copies on Steam after X amount of time in the Steam top sellers charts. Starfield, which you people call a disappointment and a flop, did the same exact things that Baldur's Gate 3 did in terms of hanging out in the Steam top sellers and cranking out giant concurrent player counts despite it being single player. It amazes me that after all that, with all that information, it breaks your brain when someone says maybe Starfield also sold 5 million copies on Steam. It's hysterical. You just can't put two and two together and figure out how that happened. It's like, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 was at the top of Steam charts and in X amount of time sold 5 million copies. Nah, there's no way Starfield did that too. Like, bro, it's right in front of you. This is so easy. How are you so lost here? Like, why is Starfield breaking 5 mil on Steam? Why do you people find that so personally offensive? And then as your evidence for it being offensive, you bring up Baldur's Gate, which is evidence that the 5 mil for Starfield is completely believable. And you don't even notice you're doing this. It's so stupid. Mike Lyons says 10 million in sales, but only 70k concurrent players. It seems like the game's not really that good, just saying. Okay, well, Cyberpunk has sold over 10 million copies on Steam alone, and there's only 97,000 people playing it right now. So, shit game. 3 out of 10. Everyone knows that you play single player games for the rest of your life, if they're good, duh. Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game of all time. That's why I literally play it every single day for 5 hours to keep the player counts up, That's how this works. That's how you gauge success of a single player game, is by concurrent player counts. That petty mid for a game of a generation. Oh well, Spider-Man 2 will show you how it's done. I can't wait for Spider-Man 2 to sell 5 to 10 million copies, and then all these same people come out and be like, woo, big seller! Online Inquisitor says, estimated, laughing, crying emoji. Why aren't Xbox parading with the good news? 5 to 10 million, that's just a 100% margin to work with. And then 3 laughing, crying emojis. Yes, Xbox hasn't literally told us how many copies of the game were sold, so clearly there's no way Starfield sold 5 to 10 million on Steam. There's no way. It's not possible. There's no way that's true because Xbox hasn't literally told you. I'd bring up the whole Baldur's Gate 3 thing again, but I'm just tired, and I just don't want to do that whole spiel again, so let's just move on. Also, side note, if Xbox did come out and say that the game sold 5 to 10 million on Steam, like if Xbox did come out and confirm these numbers, it's not like you fucking people would believe it anyways. The Chilling Reptilian says peak concurrent players was 70,000. Where's the 10 mil? Something ain't adding up. People got caught in the hype, even though the game is terrible. Look at Metacritic ratings. The irony of you saying people got caught up in the hype when your profile picture is Reboot Kratos. Like, really? That game sucks. I uninstalled mine off Game Pass. Too difficult to play. Had to watch YouTube to put a freaking helmet on. Back to Gears and Zombie Army 4. That's nice. LMAO, yeah, right. If that game has sold that much, they would have said something. Yeah, that's why Spider-Man 2 actually has terrible pre-order numbers right now. Because Sony hasn't told us how many pre-orders there were. I can't use my brain unless a giant megacorp tells me how to do it. Okay, it amazes me that we're still here. It really is going to be funny when the official sales numbers do come out and they're basically exactly what you'd expect. Given how long Starfield was in the Steam top 5, both pre and post launch, and the fact that it's in the top 20 all these weeks later, I have no trouble believing it sold over 5 million copies. 10 million might be a stretch, but 5 million on Steam, absolutely I can believe that. That's one of the easiest things in the world you could possibly ask me to believe. Now, how this affects you is beyond me. Who gives a fucking shit if the game sold well on Steam? Who is hurt by this game doing well? Kind of a trick question because it's the total opposite. Everyone is the opposite of hurt by this game doing well. By Xbox getting back in the first party game with such gusto, it means Sony is going to have to step up their first party game. It means real competition is back on the menu, and Sony now has a bit of fire under their ass to treat their consumers better. I always find it so strange that people are ready to blindly hate on Starfield and Xbox when Sony has been spitting in your face non-stop for the last 5 years, basically just because you allow them to do so. But no, let's keep trying to ensure that Xbox never actually gets to give Sony something to compete with. That couldn't possibly benefit absolutely everyone if Xbox competed. There's no way it would benefit literally everybody if Sony had some solid fire under them. Oh my god. Toodles.